He was the chairman of the Senate Bank Committee. He ran his last campaign in 1982 on $55. Now you run for the Senate, you gotta raise $20 million. Where are you gonna get it from? You're not gonna get it from working people, you're gonna get it from the corporation and the Wall Street guys and their lobbyists. So we gotta talk about the need to get campaign finance reform in this country.
It's a little dated now, but to your point, in the 2010 election cycle, Republican candidates received approximately 76% of their campaign contributions from Wall Street.
Yeah.
Democrats received about 73%
Yeah,
of their contributions
They
from CEOs in Wall Street. So
They
it's not a big gulf of difference in who is getting.
But if the money's coming from the same place, how do you expect a different outcome?
You're not going
Can't.
to.
Right, to your
Yeah.
point.
You've got to get control of that campaign
In
finance.
Virginia, right here, in Virginia, if you buy a new pair of tennis shoes, what's your sales tax rate?
5%.
4.5%, right? So you pay taxes when you buy something, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? If I'm a Wall Street trader and I buy a stock, do you know what the sales tax rate on that is? 0%. Zero. I pay no kind of tax for that. None. You pay taxes when you buy shoes, when you buy clothes for your children, but when you buy stocks, especially speculative stocks that you buy in hundreds of thousands a
You
second,
turn, yeah.
you pay this much. Again, just a yes ma'am.
I just wanted to add that I just found out last week that Dominion Power, right, and I'm going to use them as an example because they're the ones that did it. But the tax loopholes are such that a large corporation can make a contribution to a 501(c), and they can write off half of it on their taxes. So we gotta figure out how we get like the Dominion Powers of the world to make a contribution, and I'm just gonna throw this out there as an example, to Virginia New Majority, right? Or New Virginia Majority.
Either way.
Right. So, because that like benefits us, and they can write half of it off, believe it or not. So that's how they get away with making all these contributions to things, because they can write half of it.
Sure.
Absolutely. So the last thing, not the last thing, but you know, we talk about these problems, but we can't allow ourselves to become cynical about them, because at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be this.
Doesn't have to.
Every single person in this room, our comrades, who we work with every day, who we live with, who we break bread with, we collectively have the power to bring forth the kind of change that we want to see. And as long as we keep the idea, that grand idea of the world we want in front of us, there's no shitty statistic or bad fact or a current reality that's going to stop us from coming together and collectively changing that and bringing about a positive change.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you for being here, for your incredible enthusiasm, I know the work that you do outside of this room every day for the labor community, and it's really incredible. Please be sure to reconnect with your group, whether it's a local or your community group. Figure out how you want to do a common sense economics training. We will absolutely help you do it. Gentlemen asked, do we have speakers to come for various events? Yes, we do. We'll do whatever we can to make sure that this message gets out, but we need your help. And, you know, my email is rreardon@aflco.org. You can contact me, you can contact Will. He's in DC. I'm in New York. It's much easier to contact him.
You're up in New York.
I'm in New York. But this is a really critical time, and I think we really have the opportunity to really change the direction of our country, but we can only do it if we all engage. And all the questions about how do I get people to care, start with your own story and ask them their story. And find out, you know, how are things working in your household? We had a question the other day in one of the trainings, and we said, we were the bricklayers. We said, so how many people in the room grew up in a household where there was essentially one worker, one breadwinner? A lot of people, older people, held up their hands. And then we said, so now, today, how many live in a household where everybody works? Everybody in the room raised their hands. Everybody. there's nothing wrong with working, I think it's great, and as a freelancer, I've worked a gazillion different jobs at the same time. But people need to have some kind of economic security. They shouldn't be doing it because they should not be doing it because they don't have any other choice.
I personally don't think it's good for youngsters and families not to have somebody looking after them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and somebody mentioned, young people, that's, they have a very different mindset. One of the things that's happened for younger workers is it feels like they don't care, but often what really comes out is they feel that they can't care, that there's no stability there for them, that it's a really disposable society.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of conversation, we have a young, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, this is the Workonomics core module, but we also have modules for women and families, modules for young workers, and it's this information from a young worker's perspective. It's a really good module if you're working with young people. I highly recommend it. We have one on immigration, we have one on globalization, and we have one on mass incarceration. So we address different issues. You can put them together in different combinations. The women and families one is a really powerful training for women, and the young workers is written literally from their point of view. I know they used it in the summit in Chicago. They just had a young workers summit in Chicago this past week. It's a very effective way to get young workers talking about the issues that they have, and they talk about, I don't expect to have a retirement. I don't expect to have Social Security. What's in it for me?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you're organizing that set of people who are, say, IT workers, who, don't fall into the usual trade group as I did.
Sort of 1099 workers?
Huh?
The people who are freelance, who are
Yeah,
independent contractors?
Who just don't fall into a trade, or a particular skill even, and, I'm thinking about young people, like these young people coming out of college, and they're working extremely hard for very little money. How do you organize them? I mean, what do we call them?
So there are a couple of different things that have been happening in the retail world. In New York City, there's a group called Retail Action, RAP, Retail Action Project. And they have been organizing H&M workers, Zara workers. This is a whole group of young people who kind of go from one retail job to another. It's a worker center. So it's very hard to organize them into a traditional union setting, but they give them job skill training. They have legal advice for them. Wage and hour violations happen all the time in retail. They have, educational resources so that they can improve their skills and get out of that cycle. Worker centers are really an important part of this conversation because you have a whole network of people who don't fit normally into union structures. So worker centers are a kind of an alternative all labor way for people to connect to communities. Some of them are based around occupations, like Retail Action Project. Some of them are based around community groups of people who've come from a particular country. Like the Caribbean not Americans, well, they're American, their families are American now, but they come from the Caribbean. They're very tightly knit often, and so we work with, this is a worker center I work with them from that basis. There are a lot of different ways. The Freelancers Union, which is very large in New York, works with independent contractors like you just described. So they're often graphics designers, IT people, sometimes freelance educators. These are people who don't see themselves often as workers. They're more driven by a passion for the work they're doing, but they still have issues. They want health insurance. They want some kind of security. They're still concerned about, they don't see themselves as attacking their employer aggressively because they see their employer as their client, but they care very much about how do they get paid. A lot of times, because I've done this, if you're a 1099 worker instead of a taxed worker, they'll promise to pay you and then the check doesn't come for 6 months. So they're working to develop laws that will protect that kind of situation. Labor's going through a real change, and one of the changes we're going through is trying to figure out how do we fit our industries in the 21st century. In my world, I did a lot of acting on stage, and then I did a lot of commercial work. So I was on camera for a long time, and then I started doing voiceovers. For the last 10 years, I traveled with a USB mic that plugged into my computer, and my agent would email me auditions, and I'd record the audition and send it back to them, and then I'd get the job or not, and usually not. And because I was traveling too much doing my union work. But that's how I worked, and there's a whole part of the industry now where voiceover people have studios in their home. It's in the closet, it's in the basement, they don't go into a studio anymore. So that's really shifted the workplace for my union, because it used to be, if I wanted to get that work, I had to go to an audition where I saw lots of other people. I had to go to an engineer studio where I saw the producer, the director, the tech people, and probably the other people I'm working with, so there was a community. Now, I have a set at home too, and I can record my part of the gig alone. I never see any other union people, I never see my agent, I never see the casting director, I never see the director. That's creating a real stress for my union, because frankly, one of the ways you keep people loyal in my industry is peer pressure. So if you can work out of your basement in your pajamas,